My name doesn't matter, but what I saw matters. Everyone believes that Monster Kody Scott was the absolute power, the one who truly ran the Crips in Los Angeles through sheer force and reputation. But that's the first, most fundamental lie they want you to believe. For years, the media, the cops, even the streets themselves pointed to him, to figures like him, as the ultimate authority, the untouchable kingpins. I lived inside that world, breathed its violence, its twisted loyalty, and its brutal hierarchy. I was Marcus, known as Ghost on the block, and my journey into the heart of that darkness revealed a truth so unsettling, it dismantled every illusion I once held about power, control, and who truly orchestrated the chaos on the streets of South Central. This isn't just a story, it's an unmasking. The public narrative, the one everyone accepted, was a deliberate smokescreen, meticulously crafted to keep eyes fixed on the spectacle while the real game unfolded in the shadows. Monster Kody Scott was a formidable presence, no doubt, a legend in his own right, but he was a puppet, a highly effective, terrifying one, yet a puppet nonetheless. The real architect of that sprawling empire, the true mastermind who pulled the strings, was an individual known only as the Maestro. My story will answer the questions that have haunted me since I escaped that life. Who exactly was this enigmatic figure? How did someone so invisible, so utterly averse to street notoriety, manage to control an organization built on explicit violence? And most chillingly, how did uncovering this hidden truth almost cost me everything, including my life? I didn't join the Crips out of malice, but from a desperate, naive hope. It was the late 1980s. Los Angeles was a war zone, and my younger sister, barely a teenager, was caught in the crossfire. I believed the gang offered a twisted form of protection, a resource that the system had long denied us, a way to survive the relentless violence plaguing our neighborhood. I saw the power, the money, the influence that the Crips wielded, estimated in the tens of millions annually from trafficking and extortion. But even then, amidst the chaos and the rapid expansion across LA, there were whispers, subtle inconsistencies, the way certain untouchable shot callers moved, the unexpected twists in turf disputes. It all hinted that the visible hierarchy wasn't the whole picture. The public saw the bloody turf wars, the flashy cars, the bravado, and believed that was the source of their strength. But what I slowly came to understand, what became terrifyingly clear the deeper I sank into the organization, was that the true power lay not in the visible violence, but in a silent, almost corporate, organizational structure. Monster Kody Scott and others like him were the terrifying public face, the generals on the battlefield, but they weren't the strategists, the financial engineers, the ones who truly understood the long game. The tension I felt wasn't just from rival gangs or the police. It was the growing, unsettling realization that the entire edifice was built on a lie, designed to distract from the true, invisible hand guiding every move, every dollar, every life taken. My sister Lena was barely 13 when the stray bullet ripped through our kitchen wall, missing her by inches. It wasn't gang-related in the traditional sense, just the daily, careless violence that defined South Central in the late 80s. The police offered platitudes, not protection. The system for us was a revolving door of neglect. I was 16, desperate, and saw the Crips not as a path to villainy, but as a fortress, a twisted form of security. I saw their money, their reach, the way they moved freely where others feared to tread. I believed naively that if I was with them, Lena would be safe. It was a trade, my soul for her survival, a bargain I thought I understood at the time, oblivious to the true cost. The initiation was brutal, a rite of passage designed to break you down and rebuild you as something else. Loyalty was forged in blood, fear was a constant companion, and respect was taken, never given. I learned the pecking order quickly. The foot soldiers, the enforcers, the lieutenants, and at the top, the shot callers. Figures like Bishop, a man whose reputation for ruthless efficiency preceded him, commanded absolute obedience. He was a force of nature, all muscle and menacing glares, rumored to have personally overseen more than a dozen retaliatory strikes. The streets whispered his name with a mixture of terror and grudging admiration. This was the power I sought, the visible, tangible authority, that promised to keep my world intact. I proved myself quickly, earning the moniker Ghost for my ability to move unseen, to get things done without drawing attention. I ascended through the ranks, from street muscle to a more trusted ear, privy to the internal workings of our expanding empire. We moved product, ran protection rackets, controlled entire blocks. The money flowed in, millions, just as the public believed. But even amidst the roar of gunshots and the flash of stolen cars, I started to notice subtle dissonances. Certain decisions, certain unexpected truces or shifts in territory felt too clean, too strategic for the impulsive, violent men I saw leading us. It was a nagging feeling, a quiet hum beneath the surface noise, hinting at an unseen hand. The meeting was called for. A nondescript warehouse in Compton, far from our usual haunts. Bishop himself was there, a rare sight for such a high-stakes discussion. His usual swagger was muted, replaced by an unusual tension in his shoulders. This wasn't a standard turf war strategy session. This was about the larger picture, the deeper currents of our operation. I was assigned security detail, positioned just inside the door, close enough to observe, too low-ranking to question. My job was to be invisible, a shadow, and, in that role, I became an accidental witness to a moment that would forever warp my understanding of power within the Crips. A black Mercedes, unassuming, not flashy, pulled up to the loading dock. Out stepped a man who looked utterly out of place. He wasn't built like a street enforcer, nor did he carry the swagger of a shot caller. He was slight, perhaps in his late 40s, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit, his face unremarkable, almost forgettable. Yet, the moment he entered, the air in that warehouse thickened. Bishop, a man who had faced down rival gangs without flinching, a man whose presence usually filled a room with menace, visibly stiffened. He didn't bark orders. He straightened his tie, almost imperceptibly, and his eyes, usually hard as granite, held a flicker of something I couldn't immediately identify, something akin to apprehension, or perhaps profound respect. The man in the suit, whom I would later learn was known only as the maestro, spoke in a low, even tone, his voice never rising above a conversational level. He wasn't giving orders in the way Bishop did. He was outlining strategies, dissecting financial reports, discussing supply chain logistics with an almost academic precision. Bishop sat opposite him, not leaning back with his usual arrogance but hunched forward, a pen scratching furiously across a legal pad. He took notes meticulously, nodding occasionally, never interjecting, never challenging. It was a business meeting, cold and calculating, utterly devoid of the street bravado I was accustomed to. The power wasn't in his voice's volume, but in the sheer weight of his words, the undeniable authority woven into every syllable. When the maestro rose, his departure was as unremarkable as his arrival. He simply stood, gave a curt nod, and walked out, his presence receding like a tide. Bishop didn't immediately revert to his usual self. He sat there for a long moment, staring at his notes, his face a mask of intense concentration, not anger, not frustration, but something akin to quiet diligence. I watched him, my mind reeling. This was the man who struck fear into the hearts of men, who commanded hundreds, who even Monster Kody respected. Yet in front of this quiet, unassuming figure, Bishop had been reduced to a diligent student. The question hammered at me. Who was this man? And why did a king of the streets bow to him? Suddenly, countless inconsistencies from my time in the ranks clicked into place. I remembered how certain turf disputes had ended not with bloodshed, but with sudden inexplicable withdrawals from rival gangs, or how specific drug routes had opened up without a single shot fired. I recalled the quiet disappearances of problematic figures, not through visible violence but through a kind of financial or logistical implosion. These events, once attributed to luck or the sheer overwhelming force of our visible leaders, now seemed to fit a pattern. They were the subtle strokes of a master strategist moving pieces on a chessboard I hadn't even known existed. The street was just the visible tip of an iceberg, and I had been blind to the monstrous mass beneath. My world, the one built on the brutal, straightforward hierarchy of the streets, began to crumble around me. The public narrative, the one that celebrated or condemned figures like Monster Kody as the absolute power, now felt like a deliberate, expertly crafted illusion. The true strength of the Crips, I realized, with a chilling certainty, lay not in the visible violence or the flashy bravado, but in a silent, almost corporate, organizational structure. This maestro, this invisible CEO, was the real architect. The tension that had been a constant companion from rival gangs or the police was now overshadowed by a far more unsettling dread. The realization that the entire edifice was built on a lie, designed to distract from the true invisible hand guiding every move, every dollar, every life taken. My personal investigation had begun. My initial encounter with the maestro had shattered the illusion, but understanding his actual modus operandi took time, observation, and piecing together a mosaic of chilling incidents. It wasn't about flashy displays of power or direct confrontation. His strength lay in absolute invisibility and a strategic mind that operated like a multinational corporation, not a street gang. He was the silent architect, the one who moved pieces on a chessboard while everyone else was focused on the brawl in the alley. His methods were cold, precise, and devoid of the raw emotion that fueled our daily lives. He didn't care for street credit or fear. He cared only for outcomes, for the expansion of his enterprise with the least possible noise. This was a new kind of power, one that disdained the very public spectacle we lived by. I remember the sudden, bewildering collapse of the rolling 60s distribution network. For years, they had been a formidable rival, their supply lines seemingly impenetrable. We expected a bloody turf war, a protracted conflict for territory and product. But then, almost overnight, their entire operation simply imploded. Their lieutenants were suddenly broke, their suppliers cut them off, and their street soldiers scattered, bewildered. No Crip bullets were fired, no major street battles fought. It was baffling to us, a miracle almost. We celebrated, but the older shot callers, the ones who had seen things, they just looked at each other with a quiet, knowing grimness. This wasn't a victory, it was an execution by other means. It was Bishop who explained it in hushed tones, weeks later, after a successful, quiet takeover of the 60s' former roots. The maestro, he muttered, he just twisted their finances. He spoke of planted false leads within their own accounting, of minor forgotten debts leveraged against their key suppliers, of internal conflicts subtly inflamed by anonymous whispers. The maestro had meticulously unraveled their entire economic fabric from within, turning their own system against them. It was a surgical strike, a corporate hostile takeover disguised as a gang's downfall. This wasn't about proving dominance with guns. It was about proving absolute control over the very structures of their existence. It was terrifyingly efficient, a testament to a mind that saw human lives as mere variables in a complex financial equation. Then there was Detective Miller. He was a bulldog, relentless, incorruptible, and worst of all, he was getting dangerously close to our financial operations, sniffing around the money laundering schemes, asking questions about the shell corporations. We expected a hit, a payoff, something direct, but the maestro's approach was far more insidious. One day, Miller was the golden boy. The next, his career was in tatters, not because of a Crip threat, but because an anonymous tip, perfectly timed, landed on the desk of an internal affairs investigator. It was about a minor ethical lapse from his rookie days, long buried, completely irrelevant to his current work, but enough to create a scandal. The leak didn't prove he was corrupt. It just proved he was human, flawed, and therefore vulnerable to public scrutiny. The media feasted on it. His superiors distanced themselves, and his focus shifted entirely from our operations to self-preservation. He was sidelined, effectively neutralized, without a single direct confrontation from our side. It wasn't violence, it was psychological warfare, an understanding of human weakness and the mechanics of public perception. The maestro didn't need to break legs. He just needed to break reputations. It taught me that his reach extended far beyond the streets, into the very systems designed to fight us, manipulating them with the precision of a master chess player. This was the true nature of his power. My initial encounters with the maestro, witnessing his quiet authority over men, like Bishop, and then piecing together the corporate-level sabotage and psychological warfare he waged, had already shattered my illusions. I understood his power was invisible, strategic, and terrifyingly efficient, but it was still abstract, something that happened to others. The true gut-wrenching turning point, the moment the cold dread of the maestro's reign seeped into my very bones and forced me to confront my own expendability, came with an order that felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't about rival gangs or dirty cops. It was about an old man, a pillar of the community, and the chilling, absolute indifference of the machine I served. This was the proof I needed, the final, undeniable truth that my life, and Lena's, depended on getting out. His name was Mr. Elijah, a man whose hands bore the permanent creases of honest labor, who ran the small community center down on 103rd Street. He wasn't involved in anything, not gangs, not drugs, just a quiet, unassuming elder who offered a safe haven for kids after school, taught them chess and listened to their problems. He was a fixture, a symbol of what little good remained in our neighborhood, someone even the hardest street soldiers respected with a nod. Unbeknownst to him, a shell corporation the maestro used for funneling illicit funds had purchased the building next door to the community center, a seemingly innocuous real estate deal. Mr. Elijah, with his meticulous eye for detail and his local connections, had simply been too observant, too curious about the sudden, quiet renovation work. The order came down through Bishop, relayed in his usual clipped, emotionless tone. "The old man at the center," he stated. "He's been asking too many questions about the new building. The maestro says he's a liability. Take care of it." My blood ran cold. Bishop didn't elaborate, didn't need to. Take care of it meant one thing, always. There was no rage, no personal vendetta, just a detached clinical assessment of a problem, and the immediate, brutal solution. Mr. Elijah wasn't a rival gang leader. He wasn't a snitch who had betrayed us. He wasn't even a threat in any conventional sense. He was just an inconvenience, a loose thread in the maestro's intricate, hidden tapestry of financial manipulation. I remember my hands shaking, subtly, imperceptibly, as Bishop walked away, leaving me with the weight of that command. My mind screamed in protest. This wasn't the protection I'd joined for. This wasn't about survival. It was about pure, unadulterated control, exercised without a shred of conscience. I thought of Lena, of the promises I'd made to myself to keep her safe. If Mr. Elijah, an innocent bystand, could be deemed disposable for merely noticing something, what would happen to me, to us, if I ever became a liability? The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. In the maestro's world, everyone, absolutely everyone, was a variable, an asset to be used or eliminated, with no regard for humanity or loyalty. The maestro's logic, as I now understood it, was chillingly simple. Absolute silence equaled absolute security. Mr. Elijah, by mere proximity and innocent curiosity, had stumbled upon a fractional piece of the maestro's financial architecture. It wasn't that he posed an active threat, or even that he understood what he was seeing. It was the potential for a leak, however small, however accidental. The maestro operated on a level of risk management that left no room for error, no tolerance for even the slightest unknown variable. He didn't care for street credit or fear. He cared only for the integrity of his operation, viewing human lives as mere data points in his grand, calculating scheme. That moment, the casual delivery of Mr. Elijah's death sentence became my true point of no return. The protective shell I had built around my conscience, the justifications I had used to rationalize my actions within the gang, all of it shattered. I had told you, myself, I was doing it for Lena, to survive, to protect. But protecting Lena by becoming an instrument of such cold, indiscriminate evil felt like a betrayal of her very innocence. I saw the abyss, the bottomless pit of amorality that the maestro represented, and I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that if I stayed I would eventually lose myself entirely, becoming just another cog in his ruthless machine. The fear that consumed me then was not the street fear I had grown accustomed to, the fear of rival gangs or police sirens. It was a far deeper existential terror, the fear of being consumed by something utterly inhuman, of becoming a monster myself, and of Lena being caught in the crossfire of my decision. My life, and hers felt impossibly fragile. The decision to escape was no longer a vague notion or a distant dream. It became an immediate, desperate imperative. My mind, usually focused on the next score or the next threat, now turned entirely to one objective: how to disappear, how to sever myself from this invisible corporation, and how to do it without becoming the next liability on the maestro's ledger. I spent the next weeks moving with a new kind of paranoia, a calculated silence that echoed the maestro's own. Every glance, every casual conversation, every shift in routine felt like a potential trap. I continued my duties, played my part, but beneath the surface, a meticulous, terrifying escape plan began to form in my mind. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming my soul, about escaping a system that viewed life as utterly disposable, and about protecting the last shred of humanity I felt I had left. The maestro had shown me the true nature of power, and in that horrifying revelation, he had inadvertently given me the clarity and the desperate courage to break free. The order to eliminate Mr. Elijah, a man whose only crime was innocent observation, hammered home the chilling truth. In the maestro's world, everyone was expendable, a variable in his cold equation. That night I didn't sleep. My mind raced, not with anger, but with a terrifying clarity. My past justifications for joining the Crips, protection for Lena, survival, crumbled into dust. I saw the abyss, the bottomless pit of amorality that the maestro represented, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that if I stayed, I would eventually lose myself entirely, becoming just another cog in his ruthless machine. The decision to escape was no longer an option. It was a desperate, immediate imperative, born from a profound, guttural fear for Lena and for what little remained of my own soul. My reputation as Ghost became my unlikely ally. I had always been good at moving unseen, at getting things done without drawing attention, and now that skill was turned inward, focused entirely on my own disappearance. Over the next few weeks, I meticulously siphoned off a small fortune, money that was rightfully ours but was buried deep in the maestro's labyrinthine financial structures, a fraction of the millions I'd helped them accumulate. I also leveraged old, forgotten favors, quiet debts owed by men who had long since left the life, people who knew how to disappear or had access to the tools of anonymity, a burner phone from a forgotten contact, a set of fake IDs from a shadowy broker in East LA, a safe house tip from a man who owed me his life. Each step was a tightrope walk over an abyss of discovery. The night I left, the air hung heavy with the scent of rain and exhaust fumes, a typical Los Angeles night. I moved with a practiced, almost surgical precision, leaving no trace, no whisper of my departure. I didn't say goodbye to anyone, couldn't risk it. My escape was not a dramatic sprint, but a series of calculated, silent disappearances. I left a decoy trail, subtle misdirections in my routine, designed to buy me precious hours, perhaps days, before my absence was noted. The adrenaline coursed through me, a bitter cocktail of terror and an almost unbearable lightness. Every shadow seemed to hold the maestro's eyes, every distant siren a harbinger of discovery. I clutched a worn photo of Lena, her smiling face a fragile beacon in the suffocating darkness of my fear. My ultimate reason for this desperate gamble. The first few days were a blur of motion and hypervigilance. I drove east, across state lines, stopping only for gas and cheap motels. The silence of the open road, a stark contrast to the constant urban cacophony I had known. When I finally reached the small anonymous town I'd chosen, a place where no one knew my name or my past, an overwhelming wave of exhaustion washed over me. I found the safe house, a nondescript apartment far from any major city, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to breathe deeply. The absence of sirens, the quiet hum of mundane life, the simple anonymity of it all, felt like an intoxicating drug, had escaped, or so I desperately wanted to believe. Months bled into a year, then two. I found work, menial jobs that paid cash, kept my head down, and spoke little. My new life was unremarkable, a stark contrast to the explosive chaos of my past. The phone I used was new, untraceable, and I kept contact with Lena to an absolute minimum, Through a series of intermediaries, just a few words, a confirmation of her safety, I started to believe I had truly beaten them, that the maestro, for all his, terrifying reach, had simply moved on, deemed me a minor forgotten variable. The constant fear began to recede, replaced by a quiet, almost smug sense of triumph. I was free, a ghost truly disappeared, and the silence that surrounded me felt like a hard-won peace. But freedom, I would slowly come to understand, was a far more complex and insidious concept than I had imagined. The silence wasn't entirely empty. It was often filled with the echo of unseen footsteps, the phantom weight of eyes on my back. Every unexpected glance from a stranger, every distant black car, every news report about an unsolved disappearance in a city hundreds of miles away would send a jolt of ice through my veins. The maestro didn't need to send enforcers. His power was so absolute, so pervasive, that it had reshaped the very landscape of my mind. My freedom was a cage of a different kind, built not with bars of steel, but with the invisible, unbreakable chains of paranoia and the chilling knowledge that his reach, though unseen, remained potentially limitless. Months bled into a year, then 2, then 3. The anonymous town had become my sanctuary, the quiet rhythm of my new life, a balm to the raw wounds of my past. I worked odd jobs, kept to myself, and the constant thrum of paranoia that had defined my initial escape had, mercifully, begun to fade. I started to believe the impossible, that I had truly outrun the maestro, that his vast, intricate web of control had a blind spot, and I was it. The silence around me felt like a hard-won peace, a testament to my cunning as ghost. I allowed myself fleeting moments of hope, dared to dream of a future where Lena and I could perhaps, one day, truly be safe, truly free. It was a dangerous, intoxicating delusion, one that was about to be shattered with a quiet, almost imperceptible knock on my door. It wasn't a raid, no flashing lights or crashing doors. It was far more chillingly precise. A single, almost polite knock echoed through my small, nondescript apartment, a sound that in that moment felt louder than any gunshot. I froze, my hand instinctively reaching for the old rusty pipe I kept hidden by the door. Through the peephole, I saw him. Silas, a former associate, a man known for his quiet efficiency and his unnervingly calm demeanor, a man I hadn't seen in over 5 years. He stood there, alone, hands in his pockets, a faint, almost apologetic smile on his lips. There was no menace in his posture, no visible threat, but the icy dread that washed over me was far more profound than any fear of physical violence. His presence alone was the message. I opened the door, just a crack, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Silas looked at me, his eyes devoid of judgment, almost empathetic. "Marcus," he said, his voice a low, even murmur. "The maestro sends his regards. He always knew where you were, Ghost. Every city, every job, every intermediary you used to speak to Lena. He just allowed you this illusion of escape." He paused, letting the words sink in, the full weight of them crushing my fragile sense of security. "Consider it a sabbatical, a demonstration, a reminder that his reach is absolute. Your freedom was never real. It was a leash, long and invisible, but always there." My carefully constructed world imploded around me, reduced to a pile of ash. The air in the room seemed to thicken, suffocating me with the sheer, unadulterated power of the maestro. It wasn't about violence. Not anymore. It was about an absolute, pervasive control that transcended physical boundaries. Silas didn't ask for anything, didn't issue a direct threat. His presence, his quiet words, were the threat. "There's a new opportunity," he continued, his voice still unnervingly calm. "Something that requires a ghost of your particular talents. The maestro needs a discreet handler for some sensitive assets. You're perfect. Consider it your new role, your debt to him." My mind reeled. I hadn't escaped. I had merely been granted a temporary, false respite before being pulled back into the very darkness I had desperately tried to flee. My carefully constructed anonymity, my fragile hope for a clean slate, all dissolved into the grim reality of my permanent sentence. The maestro didn't need to hunt me down. He had merely waited, letting me believe I was free, only to reel me back in when it suited his purpose. This wasn't a life of constant flight, but a far more insidious form of imprisonment, a controlled freedom, a perpetual state of looking over my shoulder, knowing that my every move was known, every whisper heard. My escape wasn't a triumph. It was a cruel, prolonged demonstration of his omnipotence. The chilling truth settled deep in my bones. I was still a cog, still a variable, forever bound to his invisible empire, my life no longer my own, a ghost haunted by its master. My journey through that darkness, from a desperate kid seeking protection to a man, witnessing the maestro's quiet horror, has distilled one undeniable truth. The very definition of power we're taught is a lie. It's not about the loudest voice, the most brutal enforcer, or the most feared name on the streets. Those are merely distractions, the visible tip of an immense cold iceberg. The maestro's philosophy was a chilling evolution of organized crime. True power resided in absolute invisibility, in strategic silence, in the meticulous manipulation of systems, not direct confrontation. He didn't crave fame or fear. He craved absolute control, treating human lives as mere variables in a complex corporate equation. This wasn't a gang. It was a clandestine multinational, operating with ruthless efficiency, its public face a mere spectacle to divert attention. This understanding casts a grim shadow on the so-called war on drugs. It's a farce, a grand illusion. While law enforcement and the public focus on capturing the violent, visible faces like Monster Kody, Scott, the street generals, the expendable puppets, the true corporate brain remains untouched. The maestro thrives in this blindness. His power isn't about bullets or bravado. It's about financial engineering, exploiting legal loopholes, manipulating public perception, and leveraging weaknesses within the very systems designed to fight him. As long as the world chases the puppets, celebrating visible kingpins, the true masters will continue to win the game, silently pulling strings from the darkest corners of the system, ensuring their business's longevity with chilling impunity. They are the true architects of chaos, operating in plain sight yet unseen. I escaped, yes, from the physical confines of that life, but true freedom remains an elusive ghost. My life now is a controlled one, a perpetual state of looking over my shoulder, knowing the maestro's reach is absolute, his invisible leash always present. Every unexpected glance, every distant black car, every news report of an unsolved disappearance sends a jolt of ice through my veins. My freedom is merely a temporary reprieve, a cruel, prolonged demonstration of his omnipotence. This is my true sentence: to live forever as Marcus Ghost Thorn, haunted by a truth too terrible to ignore, forever bound to an empire where life is disposable. I am a ghost, yes, but one forever tethered to the very darkness I sought to flee. The true power doesn't shout, it whispers, and its silence is deafening.